Okay, so this was actually, I think this is actually a pretty interesting case just from a few weeks ago. This is the evening of March 13th, 2021, and we're just southwest of Dodge City, Kansas. So kind of in the heart of what most of us would probably think of as Tornado Alley. There'd been a bunch of tornadoes earlier in the day in the Texas Panhandle, and then there was this sort of controversial weather Twitter drama that took place later in the evening with Dodge City. So anyway, I'm not going to comment on the drama, but I do think this is a pretty interesting case for just looking at radar, considering the environment, and looking at a tornado. So we'll start off. I'll set the scene with kind of some obs. So this is 3Z, so technically Zulu time around the 14th of March. Local time is the evening of the 13th. Pretty, like, the low is pretty obvious there in the Oklahoma Panhandle, and there's a warm front that's pretty obvious. There's Kansas mesonet stations. This is just not including all of them, but you can kind of make out where there's an obvious boundary of some kind. With wind shift and moisture and temperature gradients there. And the black line here is where our tornado is going to track. This is Dodge City here. So this was interesting. I think sometimes we sort of think of Kansas and we think it's just going to be some huge honking obvious supercell. And this wasn't really the case in this instance. So I'll probably just use Doppler and correlation coefficient for a lot of this, but I'll just start you off with reflectivity so you get an idea. So you can kind of guess, just from the shape. Sometimes it's good to just keep it simple. Look at the shape. There's a storm here. Maybe looks a little supercellular. And I can give you the environment too, I guess. So if I give you, sorry, what am I doing here? So if this is a wrap sounding for Dodge City at the time, you can kind of remember there was a warm front there. That makes sense with the wind profile. Maybe seeing a bit of that in the thermodynamic profile as well. But this can be a sleeper environment. Look at your mixed layer cape. Not a lot of capping there when you mix it a bit. Your 0 to 3 cape's pretty juicy too, and that makes sense with this little, the way the profile goes here. So this can be a sleeper environment. And I went on the Kansas mesonet and pulled up obs from Meade, Kansas, which would have been south of the front. And they were roughly 60 Fahrenheit with a 92% relative humidity. So that's about a 15-degree dew point. So if I modify this, you'll see what I had initially. Now, obviously, this is probably not a very realistic contact layer. But the idea is still there that, it was already arguably supportive of a surface-based storm. Now there should be no doubt, even if you straighten out the line here. And then looking at the hodograph, you can imagine there's a lot of low-level shear, storm relative velocities, 270 in the lowest kilometer. So you probably should be thinking tornadoes, and not only that, you've had a bunch of tornadoes ongoing earlier in the day, just south of the area. So now if we go to radar, I've got the red marker in the center here. I've got that where the tornado path approximately starts. So if you're just this is sort of a good case for using all your radar tilts. And so if you're just going to use the low level tilt, I'll just go through it here. Arguably, this is a debris signature, I think. Could you use it in real time? Maybe not. Another thing we could talk about here is you should really at least try to make an effort to get to know your local radar. So I know we have a bunch in Ontario, and down there usually you get 1 or 2 per office, but the point is you want to get to know the local effects. So here, this is a wind farm near, I guess, between Montezuma and Ensign. You can make out some county roads north of Dodge City here. I believe this is another wind farm north of Cimarron. So these are all things you're going to want to keep in mind with your radar, because they can cause artifacts that aren't real when you're doing your radar analysis. So let's keep that in mind as we go forward here. So we know a tornado started here. Looking at the data, we don't really have, a debris signature. I don't think, at least. I guess you could argue some of this is debris, but again, that's with the benefit of hindsight. Doppler, I mean, nothing too crazy, right? I guess you got a hook there, but this isn't the space velocity of storm relative velocity. Probably not what most people are thinking of. This was also an EF2 tornado, so it's pretty significant. Now by now, I just go 2 more scans. The benefit of sales mode, we're getting a pretty fast return here every 2 minutes, and now there's an obvious couplet, so hopefully that's obvious. But again, debris doesn't look like it. If I go one more, I think this actually is debris here, just going from the 2 scans like that. But one of the things that was sort of being discussed is people thought this was the wind farm playing artifacts. So again, there's the wind farm ahead of time. And then there's, I would argue, probably tornado debris, again, with the benefit of hindsight. But let's just go to the next one. So again here, a couple looks really nice. And that's probably debris again, although again, some people were saying, oh, it could still just be the wind farm playing tricks with you. And again, we're just going on the lowest level cut to start, and I'll show you the higher tilts later. Now, if you're familiar with tornado debris, this can sort of be what a fallout pattern looks like. You can actually make out the RFD here to the right of my geocursor. I'll just drag it along. And then this is actually debris going into your forward flank. And hopefully with the Doppler, that kind of makes sense to you as well. That's the way it would fall out that way. And then if I go forward, the couplet's still there. You're not really seeing the nice tight debris ball. Looks like there might still be some debris fallout going on. And then your couplet's there again. And then it sort of disappears. So I don't know, maybe this is a bit more debris here. Doesn't really line up perfectly, but it's not too bad, I guess. So a quick way you can check as if it's an artifact or not is just go back a few scans and see what it looked like. So there's a bit of noise here, but there's not much. And then when the couplet comes through, you have this. So I would argue probably that is debris, actually. But again, it could be just falling out from a tornado that's already happened. Okay, let's go back to this wind farm, because I do want to make a point here that you can't just be sitting on your 0.5 degree scan or whatever your lowest scan is. So hopefully in this environment with a couplet like this, there's red flags going off in your head and you're thinking tornado. Okay, I mean, that's the first thing. I would argue here you have, you got your couplet. That's a pretty obvious couplet. So you got radar presentation, you got storm environment, so you got 2 arguments to go warning. If we think back to that 2 out of 3 rule we've discussed before, I mean, that would be your 2 out of 3 for me, I would think. And if we go up, so I've just gone up 1 tilt here, which is another good practice. Now look what happened here. Obviously still a screaming couplet, and look at the CC. I can smooth it if you want. See that? So the tornado is ongoing, so I guess it would have hit a structure or a wind turbine or something at this time, because on the low level cut, there's nothing. And then 35 seconds later, there's something on the next tilt. Remember, the US scans bottom up, so this is going forward in time 30 seconds. If we go another 30 seconds to the next tilt, yeah, that's debris. And look at your couplet. I mean, that's a pretty strong couplet. And you don't have to smooth it now to make it obvious. You can if you want, but. And the other thing is, as you go up, you're getting above the wind turbines. So notice how you're not seeing the noise from the turbines anymore. See, there's a lot of noise there from the turbines, and you can see it in the velocity a little bit too. Now I go up to tilt 4, that's largely gone. So you should feel extremely confident this is tornado debris at this point, right? And perhaps not the prettiest looking supercell, but it's important to recognize this is a supercell. And arguably the hook's just wrapped into itself, and you got to beware. So anyway, I thought this was pretty cool because it shows the value of looking at all the tilts. I mean, you can go up more and it's still there, still there. Look at the couplet too, eh? My goodness. And the funny thing with this is you're gonna get a kind of a funny cross section. I'll take it here. So it almost looks like your tornado is starting, 2,000 feet off the ground or something, which obviously doesn't make sense, but that's just an artifact of the way the scans were done. So just kind of funny, I guess. I mean, you would expect to see it to the ground with a tornado, but obviously because this damage was lofted just after that first scan, as we saw, you get kind of a funny cross section like that. And then, yeah, I guess the other thing I just wanted to comment on was, I mean, we had our warm front here. It was actually 9/9 in Dodge City at the time. So the office is, and this site is located at the radar here. So obviously the storm formed in the warm sector, or at least it originated from the warm sector, where we had 16/15 air. We had this sounding. Wind profile, probably similar, right? And we know it's a warm front. We know tornadoes kind of like warm fronts. So this is a good example of a storm that's organized and plowing into stable air for a bit. So I think some people have this idea that, as soon as a storm hits a warm front, it goes elevated instantly and you're safe. Well, this clearly showed that that was not the case. I mean, you had an EF2 tornado continue on. Luckily, it was over mostly rural area, so it wasn't a major impact on, in terms of injuries and stuff. I mean, there was some farm damage and some wind turbine damage, but 20-kilometer EF2, you can imagine if that went through any sort of community or neighborhood, that could have been big problems. So anyway, I just thought this was a pretty interesting case.